I wasn't supposed to be home until after graduation. Finals got canceled, my summer job fell through, and suddenly I had 3 weeks with nowhere to go. Before we dive deeper into this twisted story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and enjoy. Mom said I could come back to help her clean out the attic before she sold the house. Bring work clothes, she'd said. It's going to be dusty up there. What she didn't mention was that she'd hired help. Professional help. I pulled into the driveway around noon, expecting to find Mom elbow-deep in cardboard boxes. Instead, I found a woman on our front porch, sitting cross-legged in worn jeans and a tank top, reading a paperback novel. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she had the kind of tan that came from working outdoors. She looked maybe 30, with calloused hands and an easy confidence. She looked up as I got out of the car. "You must be Alex," she said, closing the book. "I'm Sarah. Your mom hired me to help with the attic." She didn't mention that. Sarah smiled, standing and brushing dust off her jeans. She probably forgot. "I'm what they call a dust hunter. I specialize in cleaning out old spaces. Attics, basements, storage units. Places that have been untouched for years." I grabbed my bag from the car, studying her. There was something magnetic about her presence, the way she moved with purpose. "Where is she?" "Grocery store. She'll be back in an hour." Sarah gestured toward the house. "I was just taking a break. That attic is something else. 20 years of memories packed into boxes." The house felt different with someone else in it. Sarah moved through it like she belonged there, pointing out the narrow stairs that led to the attic, explaining which boxes she'd already sorted through. She smelled like old books and sawdust, with something floral underneath. "Your mom has some interesting stuff up there," she said as we climbed the creaky steps. "Photo albums, letters, your old soccer trophies. She kept everything from your childhood." The attic was a maze of boxes and furniture covered in white sheets. Dust particles danced in the afternoon light streaming through a small window. Sarah had created neat piles everywhere: keep, donate, throw away. Her organizational system was impressive. "I've been doing this for 5 years, she said, pulling on work gloves. "You learn to read people through their belongings. Your family keeps everything. Every report card, every drawing, every certificate." We worked in comfortable silence for a while. She was methodical, careful with fragile items, respectful of memories that weren't hers. When she found my old comic books, carefully preserved in plastic sleeves, she smiled. "Dust Hunter," she read from one of the covers. "Issue 12. Ironic, right?" I stopped sorting through a box of old clothes. "You know that series? Are you kidding? I have the whole collection at home." She flipped through the pages carefully. "This is the one where he finally finds the lost city of Arcadia. I must have read it 50 times as a kid." "You're a comic book fan?" "Reformed comic book addict," she corrected, setting the comic aside gently. "I used to spend every weekend at conventions, hunting for rare issues. Now I just hunt through other people's dust instead." Seemed like a natural progression. I found myself watching her more closely. The way she handled each item with care, how she seemed to understand the weight of memories even when they weren't her own. When she found a box of my grandmother's china, she unwrapped each piece like it was precious. "Your mom mentioned your grandmother collected these teacups from different countries," Sarah said, holding up a delicate piece with hand-painted roses. "There's a whole story in each one." She used to tell me about the places she'd been. I was too young to really understand. "The dust remembers," Sarah said quietly. "That's what I always tell my clients. Even when we forget, the objects hold the stories." Mom came home while we were debating the value of keeping my high school yearbooks. Sarah greeted her warmly, and I realized they'd been working together all week while I was still finishing finals at college. "Sarah's been a godsend," Mom said over dinner that night. "She found that box of your grandmother's jewelry I thought was lost forever. And she organized everything so I can actually find things." I watched Sarah across the table. She ate slowly, listening to Mom's stories about the neighborhood, asking thoughtful questions. She had this way of making people feel heard, like their memories mattered. "The strangest thing I ever found," Sarah said, cutting into her chicken, was a time capsule someone had made in 1987 and forgotten about. Love letters, concert tickets, photos of people who looked so young and hopeful. The woman who hired me cried when we opened it. What happened to it? I asked. She kept some pieces. Let go of others. Sometimes you need distance to see what's really worth holding on to. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what she'd said about dust remembering, about objects holding stories. I found myself wondering what stories someone would read in the remnants of my own life. The next morning, Sarah was already working when I came upstairs. She'd found more of my old things, notebooks from high school filled with terrible poetry, a guitar I'd barely learned to play, books with margin notes in my younger handwriting. You were a writer, she said, holding up a composition notebook. These poems aren't terrible, by the way. They're honest. Terrible writer, I corrected, feeling heat in my cheeks. All writers start somewhere. She sat back on her heels, dust motes swirling around her. What do you do now? Business major. Accounting track. She looked genuinely disappointed. That seems like a waste of imagination. Practical, though. Practical is overrated, she said, then smiled. Says the woman who makes a living cleaning other people's attics. We worked closer together that day. Our hands brushed when we reached for the same box. She didn't pull away immediately. When we took a break, sitting on the attic floor sharing a bottle of water, I noticed how the light caught the gold flecks in her brown eyes. Can I ask you something? I said. Sure. Why dust hunting? I mean, how do you end up doing something like this professionally? She was quiet for a moment, picking at the label on the water bottle. I was married to a man who collected everything. Comic books, vinyl records, vintage cameras, old maps. When we divorced, I had to clean out 20 years of accumulated life. I got really good at deciding what was worth keeping and what needed to go. Turns out other people need that skill too. Do you miss it? Being married? I miss the idea of building something permanent with someone, she said. But not the reality of feeling buried under someone else's obsessions. There was something raw in her voice that made me want to reach for her hand. Instead, I asked, no regrets about the divorce? Only that I waited so long to do it. She looked at me directly. What about you? Anyone special at college? Not really. Hard to find someone who understands why you'd rather spend Friday night reading than partying. The right person wouldn't need you to explain that. On the third day, Mom had to go to work early. Sarah and I were alone in the house, working our way through the final corner of the attic. The intimacy of the space, low ceiling, dusty air, the quiet concentration required, made everything feel more intense. Last box, Sarah announced, pulling it toward us. Inside were photo albums from my childhood, carefully organized by year. Sarah flipped through them slowly, and I found myself explaining the pictures: family vacations to the beach, birthday parties in the backyard, Christmas mornings with wrapping paper everywhere. You were a cute kid, she said, pausing at a picture of me at 8, gap-toothed and grinning. Was. She looked up at me, really looked at me, like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. You grew up well, Alex. The comment hung in the air between us. I was suddenly very aware of how close we were sitting, how her knee was almost touching mine, how the morning light made her hair look almost golden. Alex, she said quietly. Yeah. This is probably a bad idea. What is? Instead of answering, she leaned over and kissed me. It was soft, tentative, like she was asking a question. I answered by kissing her back, tasting coffee and something sweet on her lips. We pulled apart slowly. The dust motes continued their lazy dance in the morning light. I should go, she said, but she didn't move. Should you? She looked at me for a long moment, her hands still resting on my arm. Your mom will be home for lunch. That's 3 hours away. Something shifted in her expression. I'm supposed to be the responsible adult here. You are an adult. So am I. Alex. But even as she said my name, she was leaning closer. The kiss had changed everything. The rest of the morning was charged with electricity. Every glance felt loaded with meaning. When our hands touched passing boxes, the contact sent sparks up my arms. We found reasons to work closer together, to brush against each other in the narrow space. When we heard Mom's car in the driveway, we were sitting at opposite ends of the attic, but the air between us still crackled with possibility. Mom came home to find the attic completely transformed. Sarah had done what she was hired to do, turned chaos into order, made the impossible task of sorting through decades of memories manageable. "You two make quite a team," Mom said, surveying the neat piles and labeled boxes. "I can't believe how much you got done." Sarah began packing her tools, her movements suddenly all business. As she prepared to leave, she handed me her business card with slightly unsteady fingers. "In case you ever need a dust hunter," she said. I looked at the card. Sarah Chin, professional organizer, specializing in estate cleanouts and life transitions. A phone number. An email address. What if I need something else? I asked quietly, while Mom was distracted with examining the donate pile. She smiled, but there was uncertainty in her eyes. "Call me anyway." After she left, I went back up to the attic. It felt enormous without all the clutter, empty but also full of possibility. I found the comic book she'd looked at, Dust Hunter, issue 12. The one where the hero finally finds the lost city he's been searching for his entire life. I kept her business card in my wallet. For 3 days I thought about calling her. On the 4th day, I couldn't stand it anymore. "Sarah?" I said when she answered. "It's Alex. I was wondering when you'd call." "Were you?" "I was hoping you would." There was warmth in her voice that made my chest tight. "What can I do for you?" "I was wondering if you ever clean out apartments. Dorm rooms, specifically." "Depends on the dorm room. Mine's pretty dusty. Could use a professional opinion on what's worth keeping." She laughed, and I could picture her smile. "I think I could make time for that assessment. How about dinner first? You know, to discuss the scope of the project." "That sounds very professional. I'm learning from the best." There was a pause, then she said softly, "Alex, are you sure about this? I'm 8 years older than you. I've got baggage. I work weird hours cleaning out other people's messes. I don't care about any of that." "You should. But I don't. And I don't think you care either, or you wouldn't have answered on the first ring." Another pause. "How did you know it was the first ring?" "Lucky guess." She sighed, but I could hear the smile in it. "Dinner sounds good. But somewhere public. I want to do this right. Whatever you want." "What I want," she said, "might get us both in trouble." "I like trouble." "I'm beginning to see that." We met that Friday at a small Italian restaurant downtown. Sarah wore a sundress instead of her work clothes, her hair down instead of pulled back. She looked beautiful and nervous. "I keep thinking your mom is going to walk in," she said over wine. "She won't." "How can you be sure?" "Because she's at book club tonight, and they always run late when Mrs. Henderson brings her famous tiramisu." Sarah laughed. "You've thought this through." "I've been thinking about a lot of things lately." The dinner lasted 3 hours. We talked about everything: her work, my plans after college, books we'd loved, places we wanted to travel. She told me about growing up in California, about the antique shop where she'd first learned to see the stories in old objects. I told her about feeling lost in college, about how meeting her had made me question all my careful plans. "What are you thinking?" she asked as we walked to our cars. "I'm thinking I don't want this night to end." She stopped walking. "Alex, I know what you're going to say." "Do you?" "That this is complicated. That we should be careful. That there are a dozen reasons why this isn't a good idea." She studied my face in the streetlight. "And what do you think about those reasons?" "I think they don't matter as much as this does." I gestured between us. "Whatever this is." She was quiet for so long I thought she was going to say goodnight and get in her car. Instead, she said, "My apartment really is dusty." "Is it?" "Terrible. Could definitely use a second opinion." I grinned. "I'm available for consultation. Right now. If you need me." She looked at me for another long moment, then smiled. "I think I do." Her apartment was a converted loft above a bookstore, filled with carefully chosen vintage furniture and plants that somehow thrived in the filtered light. It smelled like coffee and vanilla candles. The walls were lined with bookshelves, and comic books were displayed in frames like art. "It's not dusty at all," I said, looking around. I lied. She turned to face me, and suddenly we were standing very close in her living room. "I've been thinking about kissing you again since Tuesday." "Only since Tuesday?" "Since the first day, if I'm being honest." This time when we kissed, there was no hesitation. Her hands tangled in my hair, and I pulled her closer, tasting wine and possibility on her lips. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered against my mouth. "I've never been more sure of anything." She led me to her bedroom, past shelves of books and photographs from her travels. The room was cozy, intimate, with soft lighting and more plants on the windowsill. We undressed each other slowly, carefully, like we were unwrapping something precious. Afterward, we lay tangled in her sheets, talking quietly as the city settled into night outside her windows. She traced patterns on my chest with her fingertips. "I haven't done this in a long time," she said. This felt hopeful about someone. I caught her hand, brought it to my lips. "How does it feel?" "Terrifying," she said, then smiled. "Good terrifying." I stayed the night, and the next morning she made coffee in a French press and toast with jam from the farmer's market. We sat at her small kitchen table, and she looked younger in the morning light, more relaxed than I'd ever seen her. "What happens now?" I asked. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I've never been involved with someone your age. I don't know the rules. Maybe we make our own rules." "That could work." She reached across the table for my hand. "As long as one of the rules is honesty. If this gets weird or complicated, or if you meet someone at school—" "I won't." "You don't know that." "I know I don't want to be anywhere else right now." She squeezed my fingers. "Right now works for me." Over the next 2 weeks, we fell into a rhythm. I'd help her with jobs during the day, other attics, basements, estate sales where families needed help sorting through lifetimes of accumulated memories. At night, we'd cook dinner together, read on her couch, talk about everything and nothing. She taught me to see the stories in objects the way she did. A worn recipe box told the story of a woman who loved feeding people. A collection of ticket stubs spoke of a couple who never missed their anniversary trips to the theater. A child's drawings, carefully preserved in a folder, showed a parent who believed in nurturing creativity. "People think my job is just cleaning and organizing," Sarah said one evening as we sorted through a client's collection of vintage postcards. "But it's really about honoring what mattered to someone. Making sure the important stories don't get lost." "Is that what you did for us?" "In the attic." She looked at me, a half smile on her lips. "I think you two found each other all on your own. I was just there to witness it." When it was time for me to go back to school, we both pretended it wasn't happening until the last possible moment. The night before I was supposed to leave, we lay in her bed trying not to talk about the morning. "I could transfer," I said into the darkness. "Don't you dare." "Why not?" "Because you have 1 year left, and you'll regret it if you don't finish. Because your mom would kill me. Because you need to be sure this is what you want when you're not caught up in the romance of summer." "What if I am sure?" She turned to face me. "Then I'll be here when you graduate." "Promise." "I promise to be here if you want me to be here." I drove back to school the next morning with her number in my phone and her scent still on my clothes. We talked every day, texted constantly, video called when our schedules aligned. She sent me pictures of interesting things she found on jobs, a love letter from 1943, a collection of handmade quilts, a child's treasure box full of smooth stones and bottle caps. I threw myself into my final year with new energy. I changed my major to English literature, started writing again, joined the campus literary magazine. When friends asked what had gotten into me, I just smiled and said I'd found something worth working toward. Sarah visited twice during the fall semester, staying in a hotel in town but spending most of her time in my dorm room, charming my roommate and helping me organize my chaotic study space. She fit into my college life easier than I'd expected, but I could tell she was holding back, giving me space to be young and make mistakes. "You don't have to be so careful with me," I told her during her second visit as we walked across campus in the October twilight. Yes, I do, she said. This only works if I don't try to control your experience here. What if I want you to be part of my experience here? She stopped walking, pulled me into the shadow of a large oak tree. Alex, I need you to understand something. I'm not going anywhere, but I also can't be the reason you don't explore who you are in college. If you meet someone your own age, someone who's figuring things out alongside you. I silenced her with a kiss. When we broke apart, I said, I don't want to figure things out with someone else. I want to figure them out with you. Even if it's messier than dating someone your own age? Especially then. She smiled, but I could see the worry in her eyes. Just promise me you'll tell me if this ever stops feeling right. Promise me the same thing. Deal. Spring semester was harder. The distance felt longer, and we were both busier, me with senior projects and job applications, her with an increase in clients as families started spring cleaning. Our calls became shorter, our texts less frequent. I started to worry that the space between us was growing into something permanent. Then, in March, I got accepted to graduate school with a full fellowship to study creative writing. The program was in the city where Sarah lived, just 20 minutes from her apartment. I called her as soon as I opened the acceptance letter. Congratulations, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I'm so proud of you. It means I'll be staying. For 2 more years. At least 2 more years. There was a pause, then she said softly, I've missed you. I've missed you too. Every day. When do you graduate? 3 weeks. I'll be there. She was sitting in the audience with my mom and a few friends, wearing a blue dress that made her eyes look like starlight. After the ceremony, as families took pictures and said goodbyes, she hung back, letting me have my moment with Mom and my roommate and the professors who'd become mentors. Finally, it was just us, standing in the shadow of the administration building where I'd spent 4 years learning who I wanted to become. So, she said, ready to be a graduate student? Ready to come home, I said, then corrected myself. Ready to come home to you. Her face lit up. Home sounds good. We drove back to the city together in her car, my boxes and bags loaded in the back. As we crossed the bridge into downtown, she reached over and took my hand. Are you nervous? She asked. About graduate school? A little. About us. I thought about it honestly. No. Should I be? Probably. We're about to find out what we're like when we're not separated by distance or time limits. When this becomes ordinary instead of special. I don't think anything with you could ever be ordinary. She squeezed my fingers. We'll see. But she was wrong. The ordinary moments turned out to be the most extraordinary of all. Grocery shopping together on Sunday mornings. Reading side by side on her couch while rain drummed against the windows. Helping her organize estate sales and watching her handle other people's memories with such care and reverence. I started writing seriously, stories about the objects that hold our histories, the dust that settles on our dreams. Sarah would read my drafts, offering insights that only someone who spent her days sifting through the remnants of other people's lives could provide. You're getting good at this, she said one evening, looking up from a story I'd written about a woman who finds love letters in an old desk. Really good. I had a good teacher. I didn't teach you to write. You taught me to see stories everywhere. To understand that nothing is ordinary if you look at it the right way. 6 months later, I published my first story in a literary magazine. A year after that, I sold a collection to a small press. The title was Dust Hunter, and every story was about the things we keep and the things we let go, about the way love can be found in the most unexpected places. The night my book came out, Sarah and I went back to my mom's house for dinner. The attic was empty now. The house sold to a young family who promised to fill it with new memories. But we climbed up there anyway, sitting in the space where we'd first kissed, where we'd learned that sometimes the best discoveries are the ones you aren't looking for. Do you ever regret it? I asked her, my arm around her shoulders in the dusty twilight. Taking a chance on some college kid who showed up in your life at exactly the right moment? She leaned into me, solid and warm and real. Never. But I do think you have the story backward. How so? You weren't the one who showed up in my life, she said, turning to kiss my cheek. I was the dust hunter, remember? I was the one looking for something valuable in all that old stuff. I just didn't know I'd find you. Later that night, back in her apartment, our apartment now, I started writing again. A new story about second chances and the courage to keep what matters, about the way some people come into your life like professional organizers of the heart, helping you figure out which memories to treasure and which dreams are worth the risk. Outside, the city hummed with possibility. Inside, Sarah slept beside me, her breathing steady and sure. And in the margins of my notebook, I wrote the only dedication that mattered. For Sarah, who taught me that love, like dust, settles in the most unexpected places. Some stories end with goodbyes. Others end with the promise of all the ordinary, extraordinary days still to come. I knew which kind I wanted ours to be. The dust settles, but the best discoveries last forever.